All right, I wanted to make a short video clip about should a church have a safety team, and I've had some questions. I recently formed one at the local church here in White Plains, Maryland, just south of DC. And I'm helping another church, and I'm actually helping other churches. It's kind of growing a little bit. I'm just trying to be a help. That's all, just some free information. But should a church have a safety team? So this is mostly for senior pastors, pastoral staff, board members, any church decision makers, or even influencers. Should you have a team? This is for those that do not have a team. This is for those that already have a team. I've got a few things. This is going to be short, but I have a few things for you. And if you're considering it, here's some things to consider. But first, Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. And also Nehemiah 4, when it happened, when Sanballat, Tobiah, Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, that they became very angry, and all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. And actually, that's repeating itself now, because we all know, at least in the apostolic church, that we're growing, we're getting bolder, we're seeing things that we've been talking about for a long time. We're about to have the biggest revival we've ever seen, but with that is going to come some chaos and confusion that is generated by the spirit of the Antichrist, which was the same spirit at work there in Nehemiah's time. It's the same spirit, and it's going to try to create some chaos and confusion for us, and has already done so. Nevertheless, in Nehemiah 4:9, we made our prayer to our God, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. And he describes how the workers, they had a sword in one hand, and they had a trowel or whatever their tool they were working on the wall in the other hand, and they watched while they worked. Some of them did, a lot of them did. Okay, so you need to go out and buy a sword. No, just kidding. But they had faith, they prayed, and then they put works with their faith, and they got the job done. And so, that's something to consider. There's actually a lot of places in Scripture, a lot more than I was ever aware of. Just recently, I've stumbled into that actually would be good to use, just like I just used this case in Nehemiah. Okay, so locally, we recently, the direction of my pastor, my brother-in-law, and he asked me to put together some kind of a safety team. So I did a deep dive, and I have recently formed, we call it the Crossroads Emergency Response Group. So it's made up of two teams. We have a medical team and a safety team. So the medical team is any member of the church that has medical training of any kind. They're already trained, actually all the way down to people who've had basic life support training, CPR. We include them. And so all we do with this medical team is we bring them together either physically or via Zoom or Google Meets, and we discuss, we have tabletop exercises, and as a result of these exercises where we discuss things that could happen and how would we respond, out of that comes some great information, like what do we need here at the church to handle that? Because it's going to take first responders a little bit of time to get here. And so what is the minimum that we should have on hand? And so we have EMTs, paramedic, nurses, and a host of other people with some kind of medical training. So it's been very valuable, and there's a lot of value to be gained from this. But there's no training really, other than meet every now and then, talk, discuss actions you would have. Our intent is to, if something happens, if a sister falls out or a brother falls out during church, I mean, this actually happened. My wife and I were in the Smokies, Christmas in the Smokies, less than a year ago, and this past Christmas. And a lady, 3 rows ahead and 2 seats over, right in front of us, out of 400 people. She's that close to us. I noticed she kind of slumped into her husband. I thought, that just seemed odd. And then I noticed he was kind of like, what's going on? And the next thing you know, she had died right in front of us. Well, so what happened was the people leading, some were ministers up front on the platform, and they were not all apostolic. A few of them were. maybe 10% were apostolic. It was a wonderful time, by the way. But anyway, they directed everybody to pray, which we were. And even though there were not a lot of apostolics, I'm going to tell you there were a lot of people praying in the Holy Ghost all around us, and which was kind of a surprise. But anyway, they were directing from the platform everybody to be praying, seeking God. That was the spiritual part, extremely important. And then there was the physical part. Faith without works is dead, being alone. So there were actually first responders off duty in the group, and they came and they worked on her. The short story is they worked on her for 35 minutes. They worked on her for about 15 minutes. Then the on-duty first responders came. A bunch of people came. And they started working on her right there in front of us for another 20 minutes. They ended up loading her up and taking her out. And there was she was gone. She was gone. But we were praying. And shortly after they got her out there into the ambulance, they called us back and they said her heartbeat had returned after about 35 minutes of working on her with no heartbeat. Her heartbeat started up again. And so the reason I tell that story is it happens. Things like that happen. And she, by the way, she's doing fine today, almost a year later. I've checked up on her, the people that set it up. I'm friends with them, and she's doing fine. So I think God was just showing off there a little bit. But so we have this medical team, they're already trained. And then the safety team, let me talk about that for a moment. So the safety team is everything else. And when I say everything else, from extreme weather events that may affect the premises during church, weather-related power outages, water outage, Sunday school runaway. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. Inappropriate behavior. We recently had a Sunday school boy threaten to slice and dice a Sunday school girl with a pair of scissors. And not a regular member of the church, but somebody that was brought in. And a nice young boy that we've been dealing with for a long time, his family, and there's medication issues and such that happen. But here's the thing, something like that can turn into a major liability for your church, a major legal issue. It could be financially devastating to your church if something like that is not handled properly. So because we have a safety team and we had discussed these things, we have forms, to investigate. So we literally investigated this. We talked to everybody that witnessed it. We talked to everybody involved, and we recorded all that. And we came up with a recommendation. We talked to the family, and we told them this is what we need, because the boy was already in psychological counseling and on medications, and he had gotten messed up there. And, whether you're for that or against that, that's not the point here. The point is we want to protect the flock. That's the idea of the safety team, to protect the flock, not just from the craziness of shootings, but from other things. And so this was a part, and something like this is far more likely to happen than a shooting in your church. In fact, shootings are still very rare, but that's kind of at the forefront of this whole discussion, really, and I'll get to that in a moment. But things like weather-related events, just right here, 20 miles south of downtown DC, we get, in this area of southern Maryland, we get 2 tornado sightings or touchdowns every year within 30 miles of our church. And La Plata is a town kind of next door, about 2 miles away from our church. La Plata has been destroyed 3 times since, less than 100 years, I want to say. And who knows how many times over, I don't know how long La Plata's been here, but my point is that a weather problem is much more likely to happen. And are you ready for that? Whether you have a small church and a storefront, I've been there, or you're in a big church, whatever the situation, are you ready for what could happen? And so that's what the safety team does. The safety team comes together. They have meetings. They discuss the things that can happen, from the things I've already mentioned to inappropriate behaviors from anybody in the church, adults, Sunday school, whatever, service disruptors. And of course, that's becoming more and more popular, where somebody comes into the service. Usually they'll have somebody, maybe a couple people with cell phones to record it. They're compadres of the people that are going to do what they're going to do, and then they stand up, and sometimes they bare bodies. They do things to create shock and awe in the church. And so are you ready for that? Do you know what you would do? How would you handle it? Are you going to hands-on take them out? Be very careful with that. And so those are things that you talk about, and you pre-plan to a certain degree. You can't plan everything out, of course. And every situation is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be the same situation happened in my church would be different if it was in your church, how you handle it perhaps, because of the layout of the building. There's all kind of factors. But that is something that your security team looks at, and there's all kind of helps to help your team to do that. And so that's the purpose of a safety team. I'm not sure if I said security there, but safety team. Now, we call ours a safety team because it's not just security. It covers everything else. It covers, like I said, weather, disruptions, minor disruptions, more major disruptions. So that's why we call it a safety team. So some people say, well, we're just going to trust God. And well, we're trusting God too, but it kind of reminds me of the man, probably everybody's heard this story, the man who died in the flood. There was the warning blared all over the place that there's a hurricane coming and it's going to flood the area. Get out, go now, go to higher ground. He didn't go, he's trusting God. And so then the neighbor comes by and says, hey, we're the last ones in the neighborhood, come on, let's go. And then, nope, we're staying here, we're trusting God. Then next thing you know, he's on his roof in a helicopter because the floods are coming up, and the helicopter comes and they try to get him on, and no, I'm trusting God, God's going to deliver me. And so the helicopter, they've got other people to rescue, so they bolt. And the guy dies. And he gets up there and he's mad. God, why did you let me down? And God said, I sent a warning, sent a car, sent a helicopter. What more do you want me to do? Faith without works is dead. We're supposed to do something. We want to trust God, but we should be doing something. And the idea here is that if something happens, and things do happen, the idea is that we will be able to give a credible, competent response and handle a situation with competence. And just the 3 or 4 minutes it takes perhaps for an ambulance to show up or for a police car to show up, much can happen in that 3 or 4 minutes. And so we want to use that as productively as we can. So that's why we bring the people together, we talk about it, we discuss options, we discuss resources, and we've already purchased resources. We're going to purchase more for the, hopefully these things don't happen, but we know that they do. And you say, well, it can't happen in an apostolic church because we're special. Well, I agree. We are special. I believe that. I've been outside of the apostolic church and I've been in the apostolic church a long time. We are special. We have something very special going, but it happens in our churches too. I can cite you direct, exact examples, shootings, and of course all the other things that could happen. So the idea is to be ready. Now I want to spend just a couple minutes on the types of safety teams that you can have, specifically talking here about the security part, because it's all in the headlines, shootings, and there are things that are happening, and we want to be ready for that. But basically there's 3 types of safety teams that you could have in the area of security. So you have an armed safety team. That's where church staff, church members, whether it's 1 or 2, or whether it's 32 or more, it's where some of the members are armed, members of the church, or like I said, staff. Now, in some states, this is, it's very common for this to be the case. I could name the states, but you probably know them. In some states, this is very difficult. In Maryland, it's very difficult to have an armed safety team. So, we have to think that through and talk about it, because there are things that we can do. So you have an armed safety team, and I'm going to come back to some pros and cons of these in just a moment. You have an unarmed safety team, except for LEO, law enforcement officers, or retired LEO that may be in your church. They, of course, can be, and probably, in my opinion, should be armed. But otherwise, you have an unarmed safety team. And then the hybrid safety team, and that's where LEOs, retired LEOs, perhaps ex-LEOs, ex-military, specific people that you would choose would be armed. So that's the hybrid. Now, let me give you some pros and cons for all three. And this is very important to think about, because I know some churches that have armed safety teams, and I don't think they're prepared for what could happen. I don't think they understand, what could happen in their church and how devastating it could be. All right. Some of the pros for the armed, and this is not a comprehensive list, but just I want to get you thinking. For the armed safety team, some of the pros are they have the fastest response. Now, Ed Monk, he's a retired Army officer. He's a retired police officer, and now he runs a safety training for a firm in Arkansas for church safety teams and other safety teams. And I listened to, actually this is pretty fresh, I listened to him give a presentation at a conference I was at last week. And what an excellent conference, what an excellent presentation. I wish so many people could go to. But anyway, so they have the fastest response. When there's an armed safety team, the average casualties, that's somebody that was either shot and wounded or shot and killed, or they could be injured some other way. But the average casualties is 2 with an armed safety team. That's the average casualties. That's a huge pro. The cons, it's very difficult to manage. There's the potential for friendly fire. Now that has not happened yet. It's not known to have happened in any church in the U.S. ever. Friendly fire. When they're trying to stop a person that came in with violent intent. That's not happened yet. It's not been recorded to have happened. But that potential is there. And when I said it's very difficult to manage, the manage part is what helps you to prevent the friendly fire. There's also, because of all that, there's the potential for very high liabilities. So when I talk about managing a safety team, I'm talking about there's training that needs to be involved, there's coordination, there's qualifying with weapons that needs to happen, there's plans and procedures, there's meeting state and local. Some places have local laws that they on top of the state laws, and then there's liabilities, there's rather insurance rules and regulations that you have to follow, your insurance carrier. So and these laws and rules, they're kind of in motion constantly. So that's a part of, you have to manage that, you have to stay on top of that. And so then there's also church liabilities, again with your church insurance company, and there's personal liabilities. I'll come back to that in just a moment. So there's a lot that needs to be thought through. And I have friends that are safety team members in states that are churches and within states that are firearms friendly. And I know they're not prepared. They are absolutely not prepared for what's going to happen to them if they pull their weapon, let alone use it in a church. It is going to turn their life inside out and upside down. I have a friend that was a corrections officer in a firearms friendly state. He came home one day, he was legally carrying, and his neighbor baited him, and he baited him with dogs that, basically going to sick his dogs on him is what he used for the bait, and some words were involved. Well, all he did was said, don't do that, don't you dare, and put his hand, is my understanding, put his hand on the weapon, didn't pull it, but just put his hand there to show that, hey, I'm carrying, don't you dare loose those dogs. That's all he did. Now, this is a firearms friendly state. Well, a couple people in the baiting process, he had people ready. They called 911, and next thing you know, he is in jail, arrested. He's now, this has been 15 years ago probably, he's now a felon, difficult to get a job. It ruined his life. It really messed him up badly. And there's a lot more to that story, but that's in a firearms friendly state. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. And we have to be, and those are some of the things you take care of in the managing part of an armed security team. So for those who have teams, I just hope you're thinking this through, and I hope that you're managing it properly and providing the information and the training that is necessary in this kind of a situation. The unarmed safety team is the only people that would be armed LEOs, retired LEOs. The pros rather are, it's better than nothing. It really is better than nothing, because you discuss things ahead of time and you're watching. There's all kind of things that you can do, such as camera systems to see people coming. 98% of all problems begin at a church begin in the parking lot. And so having your parking lot under surveillance during church is pretty important. And that's something that even an unarmed safety team can do, and they can spot things before they happen. You know, somebody coming in with a trench coat when it's 80 degrees out, that's something suspicious there. Doesn't mean that they're bad and they're going to do something bad, but it bears watching. But there's a lot of things that you can do with an unarmed safety team, and it's way better than nothing. And if you don't have a safety team, I think you should have one, even if it's unarmed. The cons, it's reliant on the highly trained professionals, which is what we want. We want the highly trained professionals, the SWAT team, to show up if there's a shooting going on. Here's the thing, now this is important. In some of the data that Ed Monk gave us in that presentation, you know, in an armed safety team, the casualties are 2. In an unarmed safety team, where you're calling 911 and waiting for them to arrive. So this is what happens. It takes 2 minutes on average. Now this is from the data. It takes on average 2 minutes for somebody to call 911. And and that's because of the chaos and the confusion, what we call the fog of war. 2 minutes, that's the average. Then it takes a minute for the 911 dispatch to get the information out of the highly excited person who's calling. Their heart's beating, they're screaming, they're slurring words, they're not sure what's happening. It takes another minute to get enough information. So it takes 3 minutes before the first officer is dispatched. It takes 3.5 minutes roughly for the first officer to arrive. This is based on the data. And then it takes another minute to resolve the situation. After they get there, on average, within a minute. So it's 7.5 minutes that's the total time it takes when you're totally relying on the experts. We love the experts. I hope you do. I do. But it takes time to get them there. So that's the problem with an unarmed safety team. The average casualties is 39. That's based on the data. 39. Once the first shot is fired, every 10 seconds somebody is shot. Once the first person is shot, every 10 seconds. That's from the data. So you can just count it up. In 7.5 minutes, it comes to 39. And that is what the data has told us. So that's the problem with the unarmed safety team. With the hybrid team, that's LEO, retired LEO, select others, ex-military, ex-LEO, things like that. You have the potential for a very fast response, and it's much easier to manage versus the armed. One of the cons is you could have hurt feelings by not selecting somebody that's part of your membership that can carry, but perhaps their spirit's not right, their demeanor is off. For various reasons, you might not want to pick them. It seems to me the hybrid is the obvious choice, but that might not be the best choice for you in your situation. So all these things need to be taken into account. So if you've made the decision to stand up a safety team for your church, I recommend that your safety team members go through a certification course. There's several vendors that do. I've done 3 different vendors now, and so far all 3 have been excellent and really good. And the price is not. It's really a good price. You can put your whole team through on some of them for a set price. You can do it individually, but I would strongly recommend, because it will kind of give the full picture of what a safety team member should know about, and it covers everything, including shooting type situations. Be sure to discuss your team or your vision with your insurance agent, and because many insurance companies have guidelines. I know Brotherhood Mutual is one that many churches use, especially for safety teams, because they have information for safety teams, and they can kind of help. But you need to be talking to your insurance agent about what you have in mind, and be sure that you're good there, because and they're aware that you have a safety team, because they may have rules and stipulations. You need to be aware of that. So also in the way of insurance, I wouldn't let anybody on my safety team unless they had personal liability insurance. Whether the church pays for it or they pay for it, that's for you all to decide. But I would insure anybody on my safety team had personal liability insurance, such as what U.S. Law Shield provides. There's different ones. USCCA provides it. I've had both. I've just recently switched to U.S. Law Shield, and you can have U.S. Law Shield for as low as about $15 a month. And that'll be one of the best $15 you've ever spent per month in your life if you carry, or if you're going to carry. You need to have that, and you need to look into that to see what it provides. It provides an extraordinary amount of professional help for you. And my friend that is in a firearms-friendly state that is now a felon, if he would have had personal liability insurance, I just about guarantee you what happened to him would not have happened. But he didn't have that. And he didn't have the resources. He did not have the deep pockets to defend himself, whereas $15 a month provides that with expert lawyers that specialize in this area. So that's very important. And then there's, lastly, there's organizations you can join that meet weekly via Zoom. I'm in two of them. I'm in Faith-Based Security Network, and then the Sheepdog Church Security. I'm in both of those. There's meetings every week on Zoom. There's at least 3 different meetings I can be a part of every week. And I got to tell you, I learned something in every meeting. And at the very minimum, any safety team member could join, but at the very minimum, your safety team director should be a member of one or both, or there's other organizations as well that I'm learning about constantly that are very good. But being a member of one of these organizations will really open up your eyes and give you ideas, and you learn a lot. So some of the things that you do, you have tabletop exercises, and I can't tell you enough about just a tabletop exercise. Pretty simple. It's a learning experience. And so they discuss things that could happen, how to handle them, lessons learned from actual events, legal issues, potential liability issues if you handle something a certain way, how to handle this, how to handle that, various adverse situations, and de-escalation techniques, which is extremely important. There's also de-escalation training that should be a part of something you go after. So at the minimum, you should mandate at least your safety team director to be a part of one of those groups and a participating member, not just to check the box and join, but they should be on the Zoom calls. They should be a part of it, because it is really a learning experience. So all I wanted to do with this is, because I've had several people reach out to me, and I wanted to present something to just get you thinking, give you some ideas. I have more information. I could talk for hours on this. I actually find it kind of fascinating and have developed a burden for it. I think it's important that somebody guards the gate to the sheepfold. And I could talk to you about specifics about your situation if I knew what it was. But I only want to help, that's all. And if I can be of any further help to you, just reach out to me, and I will do my best to help you. But I think it's important that we be watching the gate to the sheepfold. We need to protect the flock as best we can. God bless.